What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another live conference preview, man. I told y'all this was coming. We are live right now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff, man. So wherever you're tuned in, watching, there should be a comment box. So as we go on through the night, man, comment your opinions below, comment your questions, comment your just thoughts and feelings, and we got y'all. We're addressing any and all comments. We'll address y'all's predictions and tell you where you might be wrong and where you might be right too. And you can even prove us wrong. All good with us, man. But we appreciate y'all, man. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're not watching on YouTube, why don't you just go ahead and subscribe anyway? Then you can head back to Facebook or Twitter. And if you're watching on Facebook and Twitter, man, make sure to follow our page. We appreciate any and all support from y'all. We love it. And we got a huge announcement coming later this week. I can't give y'all too much detail right now. We're working out some stuff, but y'all notice that there's no network logo on our stuff. That's going to be changing real soon. So I can't wait to make that announcement later this week, hopefully. But guys, another announcement, recruiting updates are coming soon. I'm in the works of, if you're an OG Bluebloods listener, remember we used to do the recruiting updates every episode. We just have too much content to fit them in, so I'm making them their own exclusive episode, and I'll announce when that drops, probably starting next week, man. It'll be my biggest thing. I love talking recruiting, so that's gonna be like my baby, the Zach recruiting updates where I just fanboy over all these recruiting classes. And we're starting it off. We're going 1 to whatever number we make it to. So we're starting with Penn State. So tune in for that one. But Brandon, let's get to the reason we're here. We finally made it to the ACC. This is our first Power 5 preview, man. And realignment has been a huge topic of debate, speculation, especially with Texas and Oklahoma now headed to the SEC. So I want to kick it off with the storyline, man. Which teams could be future targets for the ACC if like the super conference theme, if the ACC decides they got to keep up with the SEC? Which teams in your mind would be the top candidates to make the move to ACC?
I think the number one team that the ACC needs to target, and I'm talking about target as hard as they possibly can, is UCF. And I'm not joking about that, Zach. They have to lock down Florida right now. They have Miami in their conference already. They need to get another team in. They have Florida State in their conference already, and then they could potentially have UCF, who has been for the past 5 years now, pretty much not necessarily a powerhouse, but one of the top teams in the AAC. They bring a lot of talent. Now Gus Malzahn's there, so who knows what's going to happen. He's not a bad coach, no matter what Zach wants to tell you. Not like the greatest coach in the country by any means, but he's still a good football coach, good enough to coach at an SEC school for like 7 seasons, 8 seasons, so, or longer than that, but to be the head coach there for that long. Anyway, I think that's the number one team they should target, like for sure, Zach. I think one more. I'm going to go it's not necessarily a sleeper, but it's one that I think people would move kind of secondary to UCF. Would be Appalachian State. I think that's the second team that the ACC needs to target, just because they've been successful year over year over year in the Sun Belt, and before that they were successful in the FCS. And I can't remember the last time that Appalachian State was a bad football team. Can you?
No, I think it was like their worst. In recent memory, their worst year was the first year they jumped to FBS from FCS, and that's always a tough jump. Yeah, that's always a tough jump, so I can't fault them there. My biggest thing, so I'm going to give you a best case scenario first, which is I think they should target a 4-team group to enter first. You get 4 teams to add to the ACC. Your crown jewel is Notre Dame. If you can force Notre Dame's hand to come into the conference full time, they're going to bring huge value in basketball. They're going to bring huge value in football.
No. They're in basketball. They're in every sport except for football.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Yes. I mean, but you just bring huge value anyway with Notre Dame. 2, I agree with you. UCF should be the team from the AAC that you were going to strive for. That would give you a strong Florida presence and bring an interesting matchup between Miami and UCF. And I think UCF thinks they can compete. You mentioned Gus Malzahn. You mentioned that's a team that has competed well with Power 5 teams throughout their recent history. That's another team. And then I also think West Virginia should be on your list too. You reunite them with their old Big East rivals, and then you get an interesting matchup with my fourth team, which is what you said, Appalachian State. How great would that rivalry be between Appalachian State and West Virginia? And then you got North Carolina there, NC State. I mean, you have so many teams right in that small area that could be interesting, I guess, matchups and rivalries, and you can create all kind of different things. Let's see. Our guy Crazy Criminal said if the Big 12 dissolves, West Virginia could be an option. UCF could help also, and App State has a chance to get revenge against Miami this year. That's a good point. That Miami versus App State game is so important if this is going to be a realistic conversation that we're having into next year, into the future seasons. But I think the best case scenario for the ACC, Brandon, is you grab West Virginia, you convince Notre Dame and force their hand into joining a conference, which is going to be tough. And this is just the best case scenario. UCF, and and then you get like your four teams: App State, West Virginia, Notre Dame, and UCF. I'm pumped for those four teams. And then an outside one, Brandon, if you needed more, I think Memphis and Coastal Carolina would be the two on the outside looking in. The only reason I can't include Coastal Carolina right this second, they've only had one huge year in the FBS. If they continue it into the future, dominating the Sun Belt and competing in and year out with the Appalachian States, the Louisiana Lafayette's, then they'll have a better argument. And I think that is the path they're going because Jeremy Chadwell is doing a great job. And then Memphis has just been a great team. It fits geographically, and it also gives the ACC that reach into Tennessee, which I think would also be huge for recruiting and, getting more fans into this conference.
Right. I mean, I don't know how I didn't think of Notre Dame or or West Virginia. I don't know. I guess I just lost my mind there for a second, but I think you're right, Zach. I think Memphis would be a big grab. I think it's kind of out there. I don't know if they'd necessarily be able to pull that. Memphis might gravitate toward a different conference. I'm not totally sure. They may want to be because if if UCF goes to the ACC, if Cincinnati goes to the Big Ten, then that pretty much makes Memphis the head of the AAC at that point. They might like that. They might like that spot.
Yeah, the only problem is I just don't think they would if you're the AAC and you lose UCF and Cincinnati, I don't even think you can have the argument that you're a Power 5 conference anymore.
I don't think
that's out the way.
That's Zach's argument, not mine. But yeah.
Fair enough. But let's move on to the conference that we're covering here, the ACC. And I want to get to this one first, Brandon, the top games to watch here. The schedule's loaded, and I want to kick it off. Let's just get the most obvious out of the way. It's week 1, September 4th in Charlotte. It's Clemson versus Georgia, Brandon. That's a game to watch for the entire year, not even just the ACC. Brandon, how big of a game, and I'm assuming this was on your list, so how big of a game is this for the ACC in terms of perception, in terms of just overall strength of the conference?
It's absolutely huge because Georgia's coming in kind of not necessarily out of nowhere, but I feel like it took some people by surprise that they were ranked number 5 in the country in the initial ratings or rankings. I think I agree with them being number 5. I think they should definitely be in the top 5, if not the top 4 right now. I think they're that good, and you guys will probably see that during our SEC preview, but that's just a little teaser. But in terms of how big this is for the ACC, they have to win this game. Clemson has to win this game to prove that they aren't going to crumble by losing Travis Etienne or Trevor Lawrence or any other player that they lost over this past season. Because there are some people who are doubting DJ. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, but DJ. Some people are doubting him just because of his performances last season when Clemson lost their game against Notre Dame during the regular season when he was the quarterback. I thought he played well. Obviously, he's not Trevor Lawrence, but I thought he played well for a true freshman. Now, He is a true freshman, right? He's not
Yeah,
a
he was.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you're good.
I think I know I second guess myself all the time. This is a live. We can't edit this out either. But yeah, I think that's going to be a big point of focus for this week one is how well does he play. I think another point of focus is going to be how well does Justin Ross play. Returning off of injury for Clemson. He was such a big part of this offense since he's been since he's been at Clemson. He was injured all of last season, didn't play, and so he's coming back. And there's a lot of question marks around him. Like, is he going to live up to what he was? How is he going to return off of injury? I think to prove to people that Clemson is still in like national championship contention, the week one matchup kind of works in their favor because even if they drop this one, they still have time to build themselves back up into the top four. But I still think it's super important. And if it comes down to like Clemson's a fringe team at the end of the season, if they've already lost to Georgia, then that might knock him out. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wouldn't help. And I think just the perception of, especially after we saw the ACC just underwhelm completely in bowl season, and there's a big perception of it's just Clemson and everyone else. And if you go out there and get your doors blown off by Georgia in a neutral site game, the tone of the season is going to be, man, what is the ACC at this point? I mean, we even had a comment on one of our videos the other day where it was like they called Clemson not Clemson, they called the ACC a group of five conference.
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough when you have the Big 12 and the Pac-12 right there.
And that's fine. But I want to shift to another non-conference matchup week one, and that's September 5th, Florida State versus Notre Dame. Okay. This is a big one in my opinion, and I know a lot of people aren't high on Florida State this year. I know a lot of people are mixed on Notre Dame, to say the least, especially with how much they lost on both sides of the football. But this one's big for me because, one, it's a huge, huge test for Mike Norvell in a year where he finally had a preseason camp, he finally had a fall camp, he finally could put his team through summer workouts. If he gets his doors blown off by a Notre Dame team with a new quarterback, makeshift offensive line week one, and really no wide receiving unit to speak of, it's not going to bode well for Florida State late in the season. And Brandon, I know a lot of people don't expect Florida State to win. Right now, looking at the rosters, Florida State to me should be no more than like a 3-point underdog. I think this game is a lot more even than a lot of people are believing. And I'm not high on Notre Dame. And I really think Florida State, which is crazy to think of, us growing up, Florida State being a blue blood program in college football, a lot of people are sleeping on them. And I think they could shock a lot of people September 5th. And if Florida State wins this game, you're going to be talking about the stock of the ACC being at an all-time high.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is a huge game for both teams, I think. There's a lot of question marks, like you said, around this Florida State program. But I have like a sneaking suspicion that they could go on a run here this season and it's 100% because of Mackenzie Milton, I think. I think that's like my main thing is that he's coming in because in the group, in the AAC at UCF, he was a Heisman candidate 2 seasons in a row, Zach. Like, that doesn't happen for a group of 5 quarterback. It just doesn't. Not normally. And so he came out of nowhere, and he is that good. Like, he is good enough that if he wasn't injured and he just wanted to transfer this past year, he would have ended up almost anywhere he wanted. Now, I can probably say that he could have still ended up almost anywhere that he wanted in the country. He just I'm not totally sure why he chose Florida State. Maybe he wanted to stay in Florida. I'm not totally sure what the reasoning there is.
Well, Mike Norvell recruited him really hard out of high school.
Okay.
So him and Mike Norvell had a pretty good relationship.
Okay. So, I mean, there's something right there. But, he is that good. Pre-injury, I'd be willing to say he's going to be a Heisman candidate again. I'm not certain now, but I've got a feeling that he is going to be good enough to lead this Florida State team to at least some big wins this season. I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC. I'm not saying they're going to win what? They're not going to win they're in the Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to win the Atlantic Conference either, but they are going to compete in a lot of games. I think they're going to keep a lot of teams on their toes. And this Notre Dame game in week 1 is going to be an indicator of how their season's going to go, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And, I want to get to a conference matchup. It's probably the biggest one of the year. Let's just be honest, in my opinion. And it's because it determines an entire division in the Coastal, which is North Carolina, Miami, October 18th. That is going to be a game to watch because we have so many storylines surrounding this. One, we know what North Carolina did to Miami last year, Brandon. They rushed for 500 yards. I don't even think that there's even a joke you can make about that. I mean, how do you let two people, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, they're great running backs. They put 500 on your head in your home stadium.
No,
and it wasn't even close.
That was a point in the year where we all thought Miami was the real deal too. We're like, oh my God, will they actually win the ACC this season? And then they did that, and we're like, oh no, they didn't. They're not going to.
Yeah. I mean, they got their doors blown off, and this is also a defining game for De'Aaron King for me. De'Aaron King can play great week in and week out all season long, just like he did at Houston. But as soon as that big must-win game hits, Brandon, he disappears. You look at what he did against Clemson last year, got absolutely demolished, and I understand his offensive line was not great, but at the same time, you have to give me something in the big games. If you can't give me the same consistency that you do week in and week out in the big games, Miami's never going to accomplish anything. And so I'm looking forward to October 18th versus the Tar Heels to see what he can give me, because you have one of the best cornerback duos in the country you're going to be going up against in Storm Duck and Tony Grimes for the Tar Heels. If De'Aaron King doesn't deliver one of his signature performances, Miami could find themselves on the outside looking in the Coastal Division.
Dude, I guess I haven't been paying enough attention, or maybe we're just totally wrong, Zach, because you and I'd say we're pretty high in North Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So ESPN's Power Football Index has Miami as the favorite in this game by a margin of 52.3 for Miami to 47.7 for North Carolina, which to me seems wrong. And then the next game I wanted to talk about seems even more wrong, to be honest with you, Zach, and that's North Carolina and Notre Dame. I feel like we keep Notre Dame in the discussion because they're basically an ACC team anyway. But Notre Dame has 65% in this matchup. That's crazy to me. That's nuts.
Listen, if Notre Dame blows out UNC, I will do whatever. Y'all can comment whatever y'all want me to do. I'll put my money where my mouth is. We can exchange Venmos. Notre Dame is not going to go in here and beat anybody to death this year. That team is not ready. I think Notre Dame, like I said, Brandon, on yesterday's 2-minute drill, I would be shocked if Notre Dame finished in the top 20.
That's tough. I know you said that, and then you also said you wouldn't be shocked if they just weren't ranked in the end of the season, which is even more tough. I just wanted to mention that matchup real quick. I mean, I don't think that really determines anything. Obviously, it's not an in-conference game, so what could it really determine? I do want to mention one more real quick, though. This isn't we don't have to go into any kind of discussion about it, but Miami and Florida State is going to be a fun game this year. I'm going to go ahead and call my shot here. We're going to see a Miami Florida State that we haven't seen in a decade now since Jameis left, because or not even that, because Miami wasn't good then. We're going to see a game where I think both of these teams are pretty evenly matched, and it's going to be a really fun game to watch. I think, like I said, I already went off on my tangent about McKenzie Milton. Now Miami has De'Aaron King, and they have all their pieces as well. I think this is going to be a really fun game. This is definitely a game, if I were a gambling guy, and I kind of am, I would bet on this game, and I'm going to. This is going to be the most fun game of the year.
Hey, that's fair enough. So let's get to some players to watch, man. And I want to kick it off because, Brandon, I know you already know who I'm going to pick here for my number one player to watch, and that's Tony Grimes. Okay. This kid is the real deal. So in case you guys don't know who Tony Grimes is, he was the cornerback who reclassified right before the season started last year, Brandon. Came in, so he was preparing to play high school football, reclassified, enrolled in UNC, and earned a starting job by the end of the season. I don't think people realize how tough that is to go from high school immediately in with almost no preparation and earn a starting job for a Power 5 team, who this UNC team was a top 5 team at one point last year. And his speed, Brandon, it's it's corners. It's you got to have fast corners. This is the same recruit who I talked about over a year ago, Brandon, was clocked in a high school game getting up to 20 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. That's not on a track. That's not running a 40. That is with helmet, shoulder pads, cleats, and grass, getting up to almost 20 miles an hour in under 4 seconds in game action. You
Yeah.
want to talk about game speed? That this guy has it. I would put money that he's one of the fastest corners in the country. And Brandon, as a true freshman, I know I'm not going to call him a true freshman. As a high school senior playing college football, only allowed 8 catches last year on over 200 coverage snaps and only 89 yards allowed and only 1 explosive play allowed.
Yeah.
Pretty good for for a guy who was supposed to be playing high school football last year. And his coverage grade, Brandon, week 1 was at a 49, one of the worst grades in the country. It was his first ever game. He bumped it all the way up to over 80 by the end of the season. I think Tony Grimes and Storm Duck over at UNC are going to be one of the scariest DB duos in the country. Grimes has the speed, Brandon. He has the ball skills. He has the technique. I think Tony Grimes is the real deal, and he's a name to absolutely watch this upcoming year in the ACC.
Yeah, I think you're right, Zach. And I feel like I'm going to surprise a lot of people with my choice for a player to watch because I'm not a big defensive guy whatsoever. Like I normally choose the offensive players. So while I did want to go with DJ from Clemson or Justin Ross from Clemson as well, just because he's coming off an injury, I'll go ahead and mention him there. I'll give him as my honorable mention. But I am going to go with a Clemson player, but I'm going to go defensive side of the ball with Nolan Turner.
Ooh.
Dude, come on. He is nasty. So he's a safety. And I think last season might have been, in my opinion, his best season overall, which is nuts. So last season he had 39 solo tackles, 53 total tackles over the course of last season as a safety. Insane. 6 tackles for loss as a safety, also insane, and 3 interceptions. So over his entire career, he's had 6 interceptions. Last year was his 4th year at Clemson. He had half of them last season. So he had a real kind of breakout year last year, and it's not a guy that a lot of people talk about either. But I think this upcoming season, he's coming back to Clemson for one more year, is going to be even crazier. I think he set himself up for a path to success this past season. I think he's definitely a player to watch out for.
You see, I got 2 more, and I can't believe you didn't pick this on the Clemson side of the ball. And I mean, people forget Nolan was also the guy who made the pick on Justin Fields in the semifinal game to get them to the national championship too. So he's a baller, and a lot of those tackles for loss are because Brent Venables is not afraid to blitz. He will bring safeties. He will bring corners. When you look back, Brandon, at that national championship win over Nick Saban and Tua, man, the defensive scheme he ran was so simple, but it was so genius because Alabama couldn't stop it. Because Alabama at that time ran a lot of motion, and every time they motioned a receiver across, they were so talented in the secondary, they would just trade off, and that boundary corner would just blitz every time, and the offensive tackle could not get to him, and it forced a pick six. It caused Tua to get beat up. I'm so impressed with Brent Venables, but I was a whole tangent on the scheme of Brent Venables that I'm infatuated with. I love it.
I'm not going to name him, but we might have the same guy. I have another defensive player for Clemson on my list, actually.
You see, this is the guy who I think doesn't get enough respect. I know Brian Barisi will get all the headlines, all the talk. Miles Murphy, Brandon, is the best player on the Clemson defense.
That's not the player I have, so that's cool. Okay.
Well, like he's, in my opinion, the best player on the Clemson defense. I think, Brandon, I said this on Couch Coach, and I'll put it on wax here. So y'all got it on wax twice. Miles Murphy, Brandon, I think has potential to be the best Clemson D lineman in the history of the program.
Okay. I mean, that's a bold claim.
Oh, that's fine. I'm putting all my weight behind it. Brandon, as a true freshman, and we all know with COVID last year, no off season to prepare for these true freshmen, had almost 40 tackles, 10 and a half for loss, 4 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles.
Okay.
Just as a true freshman fighting for playing time on the Clemson defensive line under Brent Venables. And Brandon, he was the number 1 graded defensive lineman in run defense last year as a true freshman, and had the longest streak of tackles without a miss at over 30 last season.
That's insanity.
And he also had an almost 20% pass rush win rate, which is one of the top in the country. This guy is 6'5", 280, Brandon, but he explodes off the line of scrimmage like none other. I mean, when you look at this defensive line, Brandon, who's going to eat? That's pretty much what it comes down to. We can pick any of these Clemson linemen, but you know what's the worst thing? It's like going to a restaurant and there's like all these 5-star meals, and it's like you just got to pick one that you get. When you're scheming for Clemson, would you rather have Brian Barisi get all the sacks and tackles, or would you rather triple team him and let Tyler Davis do it, who was the freshman player of the year his year? Or would you rather double him and let Miles Murphy do it? Or would you rather try to block them and let Xavier Thomas do it? Or would you rather let the 5-star on the bench, KJ Henry, come in and do it? Or would you rather let Nolan Ryan come in on the safety blitz do it? Or the 3 5-star linebackers they have? I mean, Brandon, it's good luck ACC because you
or Andrew Booth. Or Andrew Booth.
Exactly. One of the top corners on that team. This Clemson front seven, Brandon, is going to be something beautiful to watch. But Miles Murphy, in my opinion, is the most underrated player in the country. And I think he is the best defensive player on this team, man. And so I'm absolutely pumped. But go ahead, man. Who is your? I already know you dropped the name, so go ahead.
It's Andrew Booth. How could he not be? He's coming in. He's a junior this season. I think he's a junior. I know last year was his second season. I'm not sure if he was.
He's technically a junior.
Okay. So he'll be a junior. So this last season, he also had his biggest season yet. He didn't hardly played at all his freshman year. I think he played in like 4 games. And so last season, he had 27 total tackles with 3 interceptions and 1 fumble recovery. That fumble recovery was also a touchdown, though, Zach. 4 passes defended. This guy, I mean, he's big for a corner. He's 6 foot tall. I think like 200 pounds. So he's going to be a guy you have to watch out with because he can keep up with these wide receivers. You know, a lot of the time in college ball at least, you look out for these corners who are kind of undersized. You kind of pick on them because the receivers, a lot of the time, at least the ones on the outside, are so much bigger than defensive backs. You know, I think that's how they kind of recruit them nowadays. They want bigger wide receivers, at least for the outsides, not slot guys. And then they want the defensive backs to be speedy guys who can keep up with these receivers. So they're usually these smaller guys. This dude is pretty much the size of a safety. You know, 200 pounds, 6 feet tall. He's pretty much interchangeable in this defensive backfield, but they have him playing cornerback because he can get the job done. I think he's definitely a player to watch out for. He's the Thorpe Award. He's on the Thorpe Award watch list already. I think Nolan Turner also is. So I just had 2 Thorpe Award guys on my list. Those are my 2 players to watch. They were both Clemson DBs on the Thorpe Award list.
I'm just glad you picked some defensive guys, but I'll end it off here before we move on to sleepers in the conference with one player, and you knew he was going to be on here. My boy Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. I've been so high on this kid even since the UCF game week 2 last year. I get it. Georgia Tech's not going to be very good, guys. Just a spoiler. They're not winning the ACC. But Jahmyr Gibbs was a preseason first-team All-ACC selection. And, Brandon, I think he may be one of the best pass-catching running backs and explosive special teams options in the country. Brandon, he was second in the country in broken tackles per touch last year, only behind Javonte Williams, which wasn't fair because, as you all remember, Javonte Williams broke 22 tackles in 1 game last year. So a kind of unfair comparison, but he was second as a true freshman. Brandon, he ranked second in receiving grade for running backs and was number 1 in yards per route run. And he played a lot. He played some time in the slot too. And that's where I want to see Georgia Tech move toward is just get Jahmyr Gibbs in space. You don't have a lot of talent on the offensive line. That's always been a criticism of Georgia Tech because they ran the triple option for so long. They're rebuilding that. If you can get your playmakers in space, though, on the outside, where you can compete with the rest of the ACC, Georgia Tech can win some games. I'm expecting Gibbs to be the leading rusher in this conference this year, Brandon, and he's on the Doak Walker watch list. I think he can make a strong run for that award this year. We got our guy T, man. Shout out for the support, man. T's been rocking with us for a while on YouTube. He said Georgia Tech probably win about 6 games, maybe 7. I agree. Man, listen, I wanted to do that, T, but the reason I didn't, if you look at their schedule, I don't know who Georgia Tech pissed off in the NCAA office, but they got the most brutal schedule in the country. I mean, it is a bad schedule. I mean, they have, if you can think of a good team to play in the ACC, Georgia Tech plays them, and it's probably on the road. I mean, it's a brutal schedule, but I do think they come out of the if you look at the schedule, it's tough because me and Brandon think they're going to be so much better. But, man, you can't find many wins in that schedule. But they are going to be better, and I don't think either of us have them finishing in the basement of the Coastal anymore. They're at least not going to be that bad. I do think they get some more wins, though, so I agree with you. We got Nick here. Georgia Tech's coach also doesn't know how to shake hands. Listen.
Hey, are you a Pitt fan, dude?
Yeah, listen. What's the quote, Brandon? If you show me like a good loser or something like that, it's like show me a good sport, I'll show you a good loser or something like that. We don't shake hands when we lose to Pitt. To Pitt, we can't lose to Pitt. But let's get to our next topic, man. It's the sleepers in the ACC. Brandon, I'll kick this one off. I always just defer to you, and I always just put you on the spot. I feel like a bad co-host.
I really appreciate it tonight. This is appreciated.
I feel like such a bad co-host. I'm always like, Brandon, on the spot. Let's get it. So I'm going to start off here, Brandon. My pick is NC State. I really, really, really like what this team's going to bring to the table this year. Listen, I mean, we're almost in the contender category. But, I mean, Brandon, so I don't know. I talked about Georgia Tech pissing off the NCAA. I don't know what NC State did to the injury bug, but Jesus Christ. I mean, Brandon, remember 2 years ago we were covering this team. They were missing like 17 starters in like October, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was like 2019, and they were supposed to be a really good team, and they still were getting wins. Not very many. But, they were still competing. It was nuts.
And then last year, their starting quarterback goes down 5 games into the season with a season-ending injury. They lose their best defensive player. This school just has to stay healthy. And, the schedule for me, though, Brandon, is favorable because when you look what they have, their toughest non-conference game is Mississippi State and Starkville. And I think we can both say NC State will probably be the favorite in that game.
Yeah.
Over Mississippi State. I don't think Mississippi State is going to be very good. But then Clemson week 4, probably not great. But Brandon, this whole pick of NC State relies on 2 games. They have back-to-back road games against Boston College and Miami. They have to at least split them. They have to. And really and truly, they have to beat Boston College because Boston College is probably going to be the team challenging them for that second spot in the Atlantic Division. And when I look at this roster, Brandon, Devin Leary, I feel like, if I polled all our listeners, not many people would even know who that is. I think he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country. He was balling out the first few weeks of last season, and he has his top target back with Emeka Emezi at wide receiver and Zonovan Knight's back at running back. And I think he's a very productive running back who's going to be able to give them a consistent rushing attack in those games where you have to close out, Brandon. How many times do we see teams get the lead, get themselves in position to win the game and can't run the ball and chew the clock out? It happens so often now because everyone's so pass heavy. Zonovan Knight's going to allow them to do that. My only question, though, Brandon, the reason they're a sleeper rather than a contender is I don't know who's going to rush to passer. I don't think they have any edge guys that can consistently get to the quarterback. I honestly think Corey Durden is probably their best option. He ranked as one of the best D linemen in the ACC last year, but he's more of a run stopper, in my opinion. I don't see a true pass rusher for NC State, but they have everything else. They have all the rest. They have all the pieces to the formula to be a true contender if everything goes right. I'm picking NC State as my sleeper pick here.
Okay, so you already mentioned my sleeper. I already went off my Florida State tangent, so they're kind of there. But my real sleeper in this conference is Boston College. I think what they did last season was super impressive. Their first season with a new head coach, they went 6-5 last year. Not a lot of people expected them to. They've got the Notre Dame transfer, Phil Dracovic, who's playing quarterback for them, and he has a giant arm, dude. I mean, I know we talked about him last season, but this guy can pass the ball. I think he needs a little bit of time to work on his decision-making skills because, we saw a lot of bad interceptions from him last season, but I think he had a full offseason to work with his team this year. I think that he's had time. And another thing about last year is that they relied on him. They had no rushing game. That was like their biggest fault last season. They didn't have a running back whatsoever. Now, this offseason, they brought in a transfer running back from West Virginia. I know his last name's It's Alex Sinkfield out of West Virginia. And hopefully he takes some of the load off of Phil Dracovic here in this offense. Now, I'll also say their defense last season gave up 28 points a game, 29 points a game. So that's not great. Now, it is super exciting to know that they have 9 defensive starters returning from last season because they had another offseason to all work together, Zach, and practice together. And while the COVID restrictions were lifted for a little while during the spring and summer, they were able to have full practices. They were able to kind of get back into the swing of things. I know things are kind of doing whatever right now. Again, we're not here to talk about that, but restrictions are coming back. So at least they had that time during the offseason to all work together like that, to all be in the same building, to all practice together. And hopefully that will boost them up this season. I'm just super excited to see what they do this year because I know last year they far exceeded everybody's expectations. And I'm not sure that this is going to be the season they make a run for second in the Atlantic because they're not going to beat Clemson, but they are on the rise. And if I'm a college football fan, I'm buying stock in Boston College right now because in the next few seasons they're going to be like a true competitor in the ACC.
Oh, you got a good pick from T. He said Boston College has some hard-hitting big boys, not much speed, but their line of scrimmage is usually big. Nick said BC going to be a force in the years to come. Dracovic is a stud. Hafley building a winner. I agree. And Brandon, like the theory about teams that lose close games the year before, if they can figure out how to win those, they become the sleeper teams.
Yeah.
Man, how about Boston College? 4-point loss to UNC where they lose really on like a 2-point conversion taken back for a touchdown and like a field goal. 6-point loss to Clemson in Death Valley, which they could have won that game. And then they were in the game with Notre Dame. They lost by 14, but you remember they were in that game till the late in the second half. They found themselves in every game, Brandon, with a chance to win, except Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech blew the doors off. They spanked them. It's like 40-14. But that's fine. Everyone in the ACC seems to have that moment. But
one more
Brandon,
thing. Before we keep going, I have to mention their schedule because that's big.
What I was about to say.
Okay,
that's exactly what I was about to say.
Because
it's garbage.
I was about to say, how we talked about Georgia Tech having like the toughest schedule in the conference. Well, this is like the opposite because they pulled Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech as their crossover games this season.
And they get Virginia Tech at home. Along with they play NC State in Boston at Boston College, and then you look at their non-conference, they get Colgate, UMass, and Temple. Should win those games, in my opinion. And then Missouri has to go all the way to Boston.
Yeah, that's tough.
And you didn't mention though that Zay Flowers and Jalen Gill are both back too at wide receiver. So not only are they returning Dracovic, they also have his 2 best targets, and Zay Flowers is a stud. Just want to put that out there. Zay Flowers is a baller, future NFL pick right there. I think it's weird, but that Atlantic division, is going to be tough. I mean, you got Clemson, of course, at the top, but Brandon, 3 three of our sleeper teams we mentioned with NC State, Boston College, you even mentioned Florida State earlier, are all in that Atlantic division. You could be talking about that could be a gauntlet over there in the Atlantic, when on the other side, I think it's pretty clear you have Miami and UNC really at the top, and then it's kind of everyone else.
Okay. Yeah.
That's tough, right. But let's see. T said, what about Wake Forest and Duke? Oh, man.
Look, Duke might be like the worst team in the country this year. They're terrible.
He said that's a good schedule. We already know why Nick's mad. I knew he was coming for me on that one. But Brandon, so we got our sleepers. We've done our players to watch. We've done our top games. It's time for the predictions now. So, with the divisions, I made each of us a separate graphic. So, I think mine's up first now that I'm looking at it. I meant to put B-Dubs, but we'll just start with mine. And, of course, I have Clemson winning the ACC this year. I have Clemson and North Carolina representing their respective divisions in the championship game. And then in the Atlantic, I have NC State at second, Boston College coming in at third, Florida State at fourth, Wake Forest fifth, Louisville sixth, and Syracuse rounding out that division. In the Coastal, Miami second, Virginia Tech third, Pitt fourth, Virginia fifth, Georgia Tech sixth, and Duke seventh. Those are my picks. So, Brandon, real quick, do you see any large problems with it? Do you have any thoughts and opinions on it? And if you're watching this, comment below what your thoughts are before we move on to Brandon's.
No, huge thoughts, nothing groundbreaking here.
Putting clips in the dead last.
Yeah, I mean, my list is similar. I don't think we're more than one team off on anything. If I'm just by glancing over it, I don't think we're that far off.
And I mean, I want to say, so, let me justify a few of my picks. I think so. In the Atlantic, I think that 4, 5, and 6 spot is going to be a gauntlet too. I think, and I want to say both my 6th place teams in Louisville and Georgia Tech are going to be a lot better than their record suggests. They just have brutal schedules and they have key losses in bad places. And I just think Louisville and Georgia Tech right now are going to be those teams where you're going to see them probably pull a huge upset somewhere, but then at the end of the season, their record is not going to reflect how good of a team they are, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, if I'm looking at it also analytically, Florida State is a team that could shock people and finish as high as second, or also finish as low as probably 6th in that division. And, I think putting them at 4 is about where they're going to be. I think they're going to win some games they shouldn't, but also lose some games that they shouldn't, to be honest. That's just how it's going to be with Mike Norvell and Florida State. And Brandon, I just, right, as much as I wanted to be like the Sam Howell guy in me wanted to put UNC at number 1, I couldn't. I think Clemson's going to win this conference pretty definitively.
I do too. I mean, it's Clemson. We would be so disingenuous if we just didn't have Clemson. And that's a spoiler alert. Clemson's also my conference champion. If we didn't have Clemson at number 1, we might. I don't know what we'd do. We'd be canceled. We'd be off the podcast game. We couldn't talk about college football anymore.
And here in Brandon's. Yeah, so go out. So I'll read it off for Brandon, man. His ACC champion is also Clemson. He also has Clemson and UNC in the championship game. And then in the Atlantic, he has NC State, Boston College, Florida State, Louisville, Wake Forest, and Syracuse in that order. In the Coastal, he has the Miami Hurricanes, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech at 5th, Virginia at 6th, and Duke rounding out the bottom of the conference. So, Brandon, you already got a comment. Brandon knows Virginia Tech is perpetually overrated. And T said Florida State, definitely Virginia and Florida have too many programs in their state. I can see that. And also, T, Florida gets recruited by everybody else. So, even the leftover recruits don't go to those in-state schools. But, Brandon, some thoughts on your list, man.
I mean, so my main thing here is, and you already mentioned it, I honestly thought you would have Georgia Tech higher than I did, which is nuts. You didn't. Just because you've been talking them up so much. even off camera, just to me.
Listen, I think they're going to be so good. It's just hang on. Let me pull up their schedule, Brandon, so we can just really get this out of the way. So they open up with 2 wins. I think they get Northern Illinois and they get Kennesaw State. Those, Brandon, me and you can agree those are 2 wins there.
Yeah.
Then they play Clemson. Then they play North Carolina.
That's so tough.
Then they play Pitt. Then they play Duke. Then this is the last. Listen, this is the last 6 games of their schedule right here, guys. Listen real closely: Virginia Tech, Miami, Boston College, Notre Dame, and Georgia.
Okay, fair enough. I maybe didn't go through their whole schedule and map out wins and losses before I did this.
I honestly think Georgia Tech might have the hardest schedule in the country, man. Those last 6 games could be brutal, and that's the only reason why I didn't have Georgia Tech there, man. So I like you having a 5th. I believe they tied with Virginia in my poll, but I have Virginia beating them just because that gauntlet is brutal.
It is brutal. I don't think Virginia is going to be very good this season. I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know. If I had to guess right now, I'd say Georgia Tech does beat Virginia. I don't think they win a lot of other games. I do think they can beat them. Virginia Tech, I think, drops off a little bit this season. That's another thing I had. A mixture of Virginia Tech dropping off because they're losing Hendon Hooker to Tennessee, and Kenny Pickett just being maybe one of the greatest quarterbacks in the country this season. Like he was on pace to be the leading passer in the entire country before he got hurt last season, Zach.
Do I need to pull out my advanced analytics?
This podcast.
Do I need to pull out my advanced analytics?
Don't pull out your advanced analytics because we don't want to hear a nerd talk right now. We're here to talk football. So let's talk about Kenny Pickett playing on a broken leg last season and still leading the country in passing.
Okay, Brandon. Can I ask you one question? Can I ask you one question?
Go ahead.
Can I ask you one question?
Go ahead.
Do you know who's led the NFL in passing in recent years?
Go ahead. Tell me, Zach.
Do you remember when Jameis Winston led the passing?
Jameis Winston is a good quarterback. We're not here for the Jameis slander today. We're not.
Hang on, time out. When did passing yards become the most important stat for a quarterback? I'm just wondering. It's like you haven't given me a single other stat that has backed up your assertion that Kenny Pickett is a top quarterback in the country. Where would he rank in your quarterback list?
I'm not. Look, I'm not doing this off the top of my head right now.
You are absolutely. You cannot come on this podcast with these good people.
I can't come on my podcast and do that. I feel like I can on my podcast.
Let me ask you. Is he top 20?
Top 20. See, I'd have to break it down and actually find out. Gut.
You hesitated. That's all I need to hear. You hesitated, so he's not a top quarterback in the country. I need you to just. I was cool with everything you said until you said that.
Okay, he's a very good quarterback. Are you okay with that? Is this going to be? Is this going to be like where you think Cincinnati has an elite defense, and I'm like, yeah, they're pretty good. Yes, okay, we can agree to disagree on this.
Listen, Kenny Pickett is an above-average quarterback. I'll give you that.
He definitely is. He's way above average. But so I think that he's going to win a couple games for Pitt this season. Look at that. His receivers led the country in drops. That kind of sucks.
Listen, those receivers are bad. Listen, Brandon, we had this conversation off camera, and we can have it here now. The only reason that I have Pitt finishing 4th is because I think that offense is going to be atrocious. Brandon, in preseason rankings, right? The positional unit rankings for the ACC, quarterback play ranks 10th.
Okay.
Your elite quarterback was 10th in the conference. Their running game was 9th. Their receiving was 9th. And their O-line is 10th.
See, Zach's coming in with this nerd stuff right now. I don't understand.
And listen, their defense is so great. I can't think of the defensive coordinator's name off the top of my head right now. Maybe Nick can help us in the chat. Nick, hit us with the D coordinator's name. He deserves a promotion. That dude is doing huge. Absolutely. Here we go. He got it for us. Randy Bates. hashtag give Randy Bates a promotion because he's doing huge things. That defense is going to be nasty, Brandon. But you guys, like, no, I say you guys, but you keep talking about these drops. Name the receiver who you have confidence in catching this year.
I mean, Zach, we're not doing this. We're not doing this right now.
Listen, Kenny Pickett would be so much better on any other team. I agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. My thing is, I just don't think that offense is going to do enough. Brandon, how do you compete in the ACC if you can't score?
That's fair enough because this is turning in. College football is definitely more offensive leaning. I've been on that train since the very beginning. Charlie Partridge is a DL coach, one of the best coaches in the country. He deserves all the credit in the world. He really does because this Pitt defense is incredible. But you're right. I mean, it's an offensive league now. Like, you have to have a good offense to succeed. That's kind of the way we saw the SEC turn because the SEC, we've talked about it time and time again. They were the greatest defenses in the country, and that was winning them championships. Alabama LSU in 2012 was 6-9, and LSU won in the regular season, and that was a rematch in the national championship. We don't see that now. Like, in 2019, LSU Alabama was in, they scored over 100 points total. So it is definitely offensive led. I just think that I truly do. I know you said he's ranked 10th in the ACC. Oh, I think he's coming back off of injury. I think he's going to be a great quarterback.
I think I would have Kenny Pickett probably, I would say 4th.
So behind Sam Howell,
behind Sam Howell, DJ, and De'Aaron King.
Mackenzie Milton may be up there.
Yeah, so I would have him through the 4 through 6 range because I think you might have an argument for Mackenzie Milton, and you also got the argument from the kid from NC State too. I think that'd be a thing. But Brandon, the reason that Kenny Pickett would be great on any other offense, their best rated receiver coming back is Jordan Addison, who I think is a pretty good receiver. He was ranked 112th in the country in receiving grade last year, and that's your top returning wide receiver.
Okay, I got you.
It's tough. I don't know. Pitt's going to be one of those teams where, Brandon, it's going to be that thing where they're going to win a bunch of games by, against offenses that are going to struggle against that defense. But when you face the elite quarterbacks like a Sam Howell, like a DJ, like a De'Aaron King, you're not just going to be able to shut them down completely. And I think that's where they're going to struggle.
Okay. I mean, fair enough.
But guys, the biggest point that we failed to reinforce here is that me and Brandon think Clemson is the by and far way going to win again. I think this will be their 7th straight ACC title, Brandon.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's 7th in a row. That's nuts.
7. That's crazy. But yeah, I'm so pumped for the ACC this year, man. It's going to be a blast to watch this conference. So guys, we got some final announcements here, man, before we pop out of here. Saturday, tune in our SWAC preview, man. It's going to be a blast. I'm sure that live stream is going to last all night, man. That one's going to be insane.
That one might not be 3 hours. It's going to be nuts.
Exactly. It's going to be a live stream plus a live stream plus another live stream for us. So appreciate it. If you're watching over on YouTube, man, make sure to subscribe. If you're watching on any other platforms, man, make sure to like and follow wherever you're watching and go over to YouTube and also subscribe, man. You won't want to miss all the YouTube content we have coming. We have an interview. We've been dropping interviews for a month straight now, man. So make sure to go check out all these interviews, man. We got to support the players, especially with this new NIL coming down the pipeline that's already really here. And as it evolves, just support them as much as you can. Any player we've had on the show, man, we're buying merch from. I'm already planning on ordering my Akil Glass merch and any other players we have, man. We definitely supporting. But guys, we'll be back. We'll be back Saturday with another live stream. And also tomorrow we'll be back with another interview, man. We got Jack McDonald from Austin P, one of the best linebackers in the FCS, coming on the show. Shout out to him for coming on. But for B-Dub, myself, man, we'll see y'all later this week. But for right now, man, we are out.